Hi, everybody. This is Tatiana Moroz, and welcome to the Tatiana Moroz Show. Tonight, I'm very excited to have on a very special guest. Josh is from Vaultoro, which is a Bitcoin gold kind of combo, and he's going to tell us all about it. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure, Tatiana.
Cool.
Yeah,
Fill me in on what is Vaultoro. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
you are. Yeah. Well, we came up with a name because trying to find a URL these days is pretty hard because everything's sort of taken. But it's constructed by Vault, which is of course the gold vault, and Oro, which is Spanish for gold. And Vaultoro seems to match what we're doing. But what we wanted to do was have a way for people to spend gold globally instead of, I got into Bitcoin to escape fiat, but I was still pricing everything in USD and or Australian dollars or euros, and then sending, and people were insta selling when I was spending my Bitcoin into fiat, and I wanted a way to convert into gold, so stay in a private asset that's market driven by its price instead of a fiat currency, which has got a whole lot of problems behind it, as we all know. Is controlled by government dictate in terms of price and availability and scarcity. And so I wanted to really escape that. Plus, I wanted to create something that was really truly transparent as an exchange after the whole GOTS incidents really hammered me.
How long have you been involved in the Bitcoin space?
I got into Bitcoin when I think it was late 2010. Back then, I found this amazing paper by Satoshi and was reading through it, and it just smacked me in the face so hard. I was like, wow, because I was really a gold bug and silver bug. And at the time, I remember thinking, why aren't other gold bugs interested in this? They were all, going, that's crap. I want it physical. I want it here. I want it. And those are all great arguments. They're all fantastic. But I always thought, why do they have to be mutually exclusive? Why can't you have both? And why can't you combine both? And that's what we've done. Yeah.
How long have you been working on this project for?
We launched this February 2015, but we were working behind the scenes for a year on it, pretty much exactly a year.
Okay.
So now we've been around for a year and a half.
Yeah. And how do you find it? I mean, how do you convey to people that this is a real thing?
Oh well, we've got a 91% market trading growth per month and 29% growth in user acquisition. So people are really interested in the concept, because what you can do is you can now trade milligrams of gold, so down to the milligrams, so 5 cents worth. So that means the unbanked can start trading. Someone in Botswana can start receiving Bitcoin without having to go through all the KYC nightmare that fiat exchanges make you do. They can instantly convert to gold, to hold it there, to escape the volatility of Bitcoin, and then spend that gold as Bitcoin whenever they need to. The reason
why do you not need KYC in those situations?
Because when you go and buy a watch, for instance, you don't need to give your passport and everything, because you're buying a good. If you had to scan your passport for every time you bought a good, the whole society would just come to a crumble. Plus, it would be extremely bad for user security, because your passport's being scanned at every store. So, gold is the same thing. When you buy gold, it's a good. So European law lets you buy 7,900 euros worth of gold, or worth of anything, without KYC. We've brought that down to $5,000 worth, because we want to be well within regulation, and that's plenty for most people. And once you buy enough, once you start having enough gold anyway, we do recommend that people do verify themselves for their own safety, because the gold is stored in their name, secured in their name as their property. So we're a marketplace that lets people trade gold that they own. It's not an IOU or a certificate of something like that. It's actually their gold. So when they don't upload their KYC documents, it's held in their email, which if they lose their password or their two-factor authentication code or something like that, it can be quite expensive to prove that you are the owner of the emails. Or if they were to pass away, their estate's management would have to prove that that email belonged to the deceased, which can be expensive too for the user. So we do recommend, if they do get more than what they're comfortable with, they should verify themselves.
So where does the gold sit? I'm confused. So they're getting these digital certificates, right? And it says equals gold. And so where is that gold sitting?
That gold's sitting in Swiss high security vaults. So they're top tier vaults in Switzerland, and they are in a duty-free zone within Switzerland. So if they request physical delivery of the gold, it automatically attracts Swiss duty, Swiss taxes, and then there's form costs and delivery costs and stuff like that, as well as taxes when it arrives into the other country. So that's how that works, and if they want physical delivery. But it's a quite expensive way of buying gold that you can touch and feel, because of all the duties that happen. The gold that we get is market price, so it's at spot price. So there's not much over spot that people are paying, and they can instantly sell it by on the market to send Bitcoin. So what we've tried to do is allow people to get Bitcoin addresses and pay those Bitcoin addresses with gold, if that makes sense.
How would people make a payment with gold to a Bitcoin address? Would they need to have a certain type of wallet? Like for me with Tatiana Coin, I need to have a counter wallet. How do they get your type of gold?
They sign up for an account on Vaultoro.com, and then they basically generate a Bitcoin address, and they can send Bitcoin to that address, and then when they need to pay for something, they can sell the gold to Bitcoin to that address, to an outgoing address that they choose. So let's say they're buying something on Overstock and they get the Bitcoin address, they can then do that through Vaultoro. We are building a phone app which will let you do that a lot easier, but right now we are basically a trading platform, so it's not like every other gold exchange on the market right now is just a single party buying and selling at their spread. So if you buy gold with them, and then you decide to buy back, they could change their spread to being something really, they could change their buyback price to be really expensive. Whereas we can't, because other people will jump in and come close, because it's a true market of thousands of people buying and selling.
So that's how you're different with other types of, because there are a few other projects that are like this, correct? Or similar?
Yeah, they're similar, but there's no one else that's got a true marketplace where there's a price discovery mechanism of people buying and selling between gold and Bitcoin, which is great because it gives Bitcoin a price discovery based on another commodity as well, which is nice.
But it's not your own currency, or it is?
No. What do you mean?
I guess I'm trying to understand. I'm sorry, I just don't think I understand. Is it like an altcoin with the gold attached to it, or is it just Bitcoin with value assigned internally from the vault?
Yes, that's correct. So there's no altcoin attached. It's the second one, yeah.
Okay, great. So you don't have like a counterparty coin or anything like different. It's just Bitcoin, and then you guys are keeping an internal tally of moving the gold around without actually physically moving the gold around. You just say, okay, I
Correct.
got $2 billion in gold in this vault. Block A and Block B are, competing against one another, and that's that. And then people can kind of sell it. And one guy has Block A, the next guy has Block B.
Yeah, that's correct. And what we've done is, I got stung by Mt. Gox, and that was another reason for me wanting to build this exchange, was to say, look, I want to show how transparent an exchange can be, because the blockchain makes it transparent. I'm sick and tired of these exchanges fiddling around, not showing their cold wallet addresses and not being self-auditable, like publicly auditable. So what we did, we developed a system which we call the glass books system, where we basically give every user an anonymous ID code, and then they can check on audit.vaultoro.com, and even when they're logged out, so they don't need to be logged in, so we can't check when people are checking. And they can check their ID. We list everybody's ID, anonymous ID, kind of like a Bitcoin address. It's sort of anonymous, but you don't know, it's public, but you don't know who it belongs to.
Sure.
So this anonymous ID shows how much Bitcoin that ID has got and how much gold that ID's got. And you can go through everybody and then see the sum of all those holdings. You can then compare the Bitcoin holdings with the cold wallets and the warm wallet, and make sure that we have the Bitcoin that we say we have. And you can also check the gold holdings and compare that to the vault operator statements that we get on a weekly basis, as well as the insurance papers that we get, which we publish, as well as the BDO International audit papers. So BDO International is one of the biggest auditors in the world that audit the vault.
Yeah, but how do they know that you have the golden vault? I mean, you don't have anybody standing there with like a picture of it, like a running photo of gold or something. So how do they know that?
So there's really really well-defined structures of how to audit gold vaults. BDO International, it's a $4 billion company. It's one of the largest auditors in the world. They physically go to the vault twice a year and do everything. There's quite a big structure to it, so they'd have to ring the insurance company. The insurance company opens a window of opportunity for the vault operator to go in with armed guards and the auditors and go through and check that all gold is there. And then we've got letters of assurance that they have checked, and we publish that as well.
Okay. What happens if everyone wants to claim their gold at the same time? Do you have any? I guess it would be almost like fractional reserve lending. But
no, not at all. That's the opposite.
Right.
That's what.
Well, I think the question was, would you have that issue? But it seems like you have all the gold on hand at all times, correct?
Yeah, and that's super important to me, because fractional reserve banking is this scam that needs to be stopped. It's the root of the scam. Of every problem most of the financial problems of the world are based on this fractional reserve banking crud that we've all fallen for. And the whole point of Vaultoro is to say there's no fractional reserve. It's 100% reserve. In fact, we're always above 100% reserve, and that's provable, which was also very important. There are other ways to audit, which Greg Maxwell and Peter Dodd put together, a cryptographic proof way of auditing. And I gave a talk at the Amsterdam Bitcoin meetup about this. It's extremely hard for normal people to go and look at this cryptographic proof and really understand what's going on. And for public audits to work, you need as many eyes as possible keeping track of this stuff, and that's why with the glass books of Vaultoro, it's really easy for grandma to go and check her anonymous ID, see how much she's got. Yep, it's there, and check the printouts. It's a really nice, easy way to check, and it means anyone can do it, which is really.
So where are you based? In London?
In London, yeah, but we've got developers, a development office in Berlin, so I'm back and forth between Berlin and London.
How is the regulation in London compared to some other places?
The regulation in London is really good, actually, compared to other places. I mean, New York is a complete mess. I'm sure that they'll turn that around and change it because everyone's fleeing. We're still working on our solution for that, which will probably be something like, I do not live in North Korea, Syria, Iran, or New York. I mean, with a little checkbox. That's probably what we'll have to do, which is extremely sad. It's extremely sad that New Yorkers get put into the same group as these, as North Korea. I mean, it's ludicrous. And for a country that goes around the world, starting wars for freedom, so-called. It's really sad to see that New Yorkers are having to deal with such tyranny.
Yeah, I had been at a BitLicense explanation, and I was pretty appalled. I had been ignoring all of that information because I'm like, I don't care about regulation. It doesn't apply to me. I don't live in New York. It's more of a blanket, regulation sucks, which, we have to unfortunately deal with it, so there has to be some sort of a concession made, but it wasn't something that concerned me. But when I finally took the time and I went to that talk where they were speaking about it, it was amazing how vague and ridiculous it was. And we had an attorney, presumably gets paid quite a lot of money, to help navigate around the regulations, and people kept asking him questions, and every single answer he genuinely didn't have. He didn't have an answer for them. And now that Losky is not there anymore, one can't even count on Losky's previous experiences to help figure out, what are they likely to decree. And it's so expensive, and I remember I left afterward with a girlfriend of mine, and she and I were talking, and she actually, while I adore her, I didn't realize that she was so pro-regulation. And it was such an unusual conversation because she was like, well, you have to keep the terrorists out. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we're the terrorists. And it was so foreign to her, and it was very surprising to me that even though this was a good friend of mine, and Bitcoin is I think of it as sort of a liberty-minded thing, there are really people that are coming from the other side of the aisle. And I can't easily dismiss her like I would dismiss somebody else saying that, where I'd be like, whatever you say it is, because I really respect her opinion. She's really intelligent. And I don't know how we kind of come to terms with that. And in general, I've been a little bit uncomfortable with the banking industry's interest in Bitcoin, because I think that what they're trying to do is take out all the parts that would prevent them from being dirty thieves, and they're keeping the parts that will help them still save money. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think that all people in the banking industry are like that. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are very frustrated with the system. But that being said, I'm not really too convinced that the banking industry's involvement is all roses and cheesecake. What do you think about that?
I think that if the cat's out of the bag, folks. I mean, that's what it is. It's out of the bag, and if they regulate it like New York has, everyone will exit. The new financial hub will find a home somewhere else, and they will miss out. Just like Andreas Antonopoulos has used the example of the Red Flag Act for cars, where when cars were first being invented, England passed this crazy regulations because the horse and carriage industry, the horse industry, the shoemakers for the horses, the hay bale makers, the wheel makers for the carriages, the drivers lobby. They were all anti these horseless carriages, and they were for crazy rich people, and you basically passed these lobbies that you needed three people to have one of these horseless carriages. They were so ridiculously dangerous. Plus, you needed someone to run in front of the car with a red flag, so the car could only go as fast as some poor bastard could run with this flag. And meanwhile, America was freedom, and go do what you will. Henry Ford runs with it, and really the car industry went bonkers, and in England it just halted, of course, until they overturned it. And so, regulatory capture is a strategy which is actually quite normal. I mean, it's a rational thing that companies do to try to gain the system, and that's what bankers are trying to do in Wall Street is definitely weary of Bitcoin, of course. But they can also see the potential, like you said, for themselves. But they want to lock out startups like Vaultoro, like Shapeshift, like all these companies that are doing amazing stuff in the fintech sector. They want to crush and put up this nice wall that you have to jump over, which is almost impossible. You can't comply with the cost is extremely ridiculous. Then the paperwork just drowns you, so you can't work on your startup. And the whole point of regulation is to protect the consumer. And this is where markets are really important, and that's why I think something like Mt. Gox collapse. If we as consumers and users of Bitcoin don't demand transparency like we do, to the level of we do from exchanges, then we are going to get another hack, which then everyone will demand, oh, we need more regulation because look what they did. It's this problem reaction solution thing where where there's this big problem, everyone reacts to it, and what's the solution? The government comes in and says, well, you need regulation and crush the little guy. So JP Morgan will be the Bitcoin exchange that you go to or whatever, God forbid. And so it's really important that the marketplace of users excuse me, really demand for themselves regulation, self-regulation of exchanges by voting with your feet and not, just walking away from exchanges that aren't transparent.
I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't want all the power for the industries that have basically ruined the world. I mean, I know that seems a little bit melodramatic to say, but I think when I found out about what the Federal Reserve did, I felt like they were literally the biggest enemy of everything, everywhere, because the root of all of these problems is money, a lack of money, the ability to control money, which allows them to wage wars that are unconstitutional. They don't need to check in with anybody. And that whole protectionist racket is just horrifying. I mean, I know before I called the U.S. terrorists. I think that's a pretty strong statement, but unfortunately, I think that actually is happening in a lot of different ways, and it's really disturbing.
Well, yeah, I mean, to Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker is a terrorist. I mean, the good guy. It depends what side you're on. But you're right. The concept that the Federal Reserve System has basically cultivated globally of lending money into existence with debt attached, having money as debt, is a really, really absolutely evil scheme. you know, I mean, it's by you know, if I pull 50 euros out of my pocket, or pound or dollars, somebody owes 50 euros plus interest to a bank. And so this means that there's a whole class of people, and I don't like the word class because it has all this Marxist stuff behind it, but there is this whole bunch of people that are basically clamoring to borrow more from the bank to pay the people that already owe money to the bank, so you can. There's this constant clamoring of debt globally, and when you zoom out from a consumer level of people owing money to a country level, we see problems like Greece arising, where the whole country is so in debt, or Puerto Rico now. So it's it's a really awful scheme, and that's why, you know, Bitcoin or gold is spent into existence instead of lent into existence. So somebody goes and finds gold and spends it into existence, and then that gold moves without intrinsic debt attached to it. Just like Bitcoin is found, these special numbers, these rare numbers are found and spent into existence by the miners. And that's something intrinsically different to the Federal Reserve System, which, like you said, is really a root of the majority of problems that we're seeing in the world. Definitely.
Do you feel uncomfortable ever? You know, one of the ways that we connected was because, you know, we're both pretty liberty-minded. As a company that kind of has to play ball with those larger institutions to a certain extent, do you feel that your politics can be maybe that you should kind of tone it down, kind of thing? I don't think you should, but I'm just wondering, do you ever feel that pressure, I guess?
No, I mean, I'm pretty sturdy on my belief that you don't hit people and you don't steal from people. That's the basic thing, and government, their only function is to basically hit and steal. So we, you know, and we all learn not to do that in kindergarten, for God's sake. So, you know, I don't think our views are that radical, actually. You know, it's like we just want the freedom to connect and to trade, and we don't want to initiate force, and we don't like the initiation of the use of force. So I don't think, no, I mean, I definitely, doesn't bother me. You know, Roger Ver as well, he's quite open about the fact that he's a voluntarist, and I think that's, you know, the whole concept, I think it's important that we don't bow down and say, oh, let's, you know, a little bit of this and that. Of course, we have to all play ball in life. You know, we have to pay our taxes. I don't want to end up in a cage, and that's just what it is. But you know, we can, in a personal way, live as liberty-minded as possible, and we can raise our children as liberty-minded as possible, and hope that the next generation has more and more freedom, and aim for more and more freedom. And when a major incident happens, let's say a terrorist attack or something like that, instead of knee-jerk reactions and calling for bigger government and more control and more surveillance state, nanny-state activity, we think, okay, well, why did this happen, and actually look at answers in an adult fashion, if I can say it that way.
Do you think that there is common sense that's salvageable among the populace? I mean, I was watching Idiocracy last night, which I'd seen already, but you know, I hadn't seen it in a while. It's a great movie. And I was talking to a friend today, and we were saying that Idiocracy 1984 with the sprinkle of Brave New World is basically what we're living in, right? And
Yeah.
it seems very discouraging to try and encourage people to think about these things, you know. Not always. I think that there is a thirst for knowledge. But for example, in the United States right now, everybody's going crazy over Bernie Sanders. I'm like, he's a socialist. This is a bad idea. Does nobody else think this is a bad idea? And it amazes me, he had 28,000 people at a rally, and that's more than Ron even had. And Ron had a ton of people. But what's weird is that Bernie Sanders having 28,000 people at a rally is definitely on the news. Whereas when Ron Paul was having 10,000 people, it was specifically being reported that he had a couple hundred.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty. I mean, I think that maybe I hate being conspiratorial because it's such a like a gray zone, but
Yeah.
there really is something to be said for the fact that the socialism thing is still A-okay because it's reinforcing the power of the government versus, you know, liberty, which is all about the individual, which is basically also dismantling the power structure to a certain extent.
Yeah, God, I remember it so clearly when Ron Paul was running, and I mean, they had blimps in the air from the grassroots movement. They had all sorts of stuff. It was so exciting to see the energy. I mean, the whole concept of the Tea Party movement all came from that, and then evolved into some status nightmare again. But originally, the seed was, hey, you know, let's gather people that believe the similar thing. And of course, what we know of tea parties now is this very different beast than what it was when it first started. But yeah, the media was just reporting that like nothing was there was vote fraud in in a few of the places that I can remember, where people were they were basically kicking people out of
They were voted into the positions, and they were just kicking them out and breaking their own rules. It was crazy.
It was crazy. It was so transparently crazy, and yeah, it wasn't being reported. And but I think, you know, if you look at the socialist power structure in the state or anywhere, you know, a lot of the teachers and professors at universities and stuff, they're all being paid and have very cushy positions because the state apparatus. These, you know, so we as free people who do not rely on the state as much as those people do are constantly under pressure by people that are funded by the state apparatus. I mean, the American government's, I think, the biggest job giver in history. And so all those people are going to be for things that are more based on redistribution of wealth through force.
Well, what they say about democracy, which I always think is a really great statement, is it's two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. So if they can just get over 50% of the population dependent on Big Daddy, then the other people don't really, they're unable to really have their voices heard.
Yeah, yeah. The problem is you eventually run out of other people's money, and that's what will happen. I mean, it's
I
happened
think that
every
that's what we're
time.
seeing right now. I mean, look at what happened in Greece. Look at what's happening in Puerto Rico. Look at what happened in Cyprus before.
Yeah.
I mean, as a U.S. citizen, I think it's terrifying, to be honest, because they've been very brutal with the people. The racial issue has been amped up, and I'm not saying that there isn't a racial component going on in everywhere around the world. I mean, people look at each other, they see white skin, they see black skin, they see yellow skin, people make judgments. I'm not necessarily excusing that, but I think it's pretty human. But what's happened here is that it's been, you know, ignited and really kind of inflamed so people can basically not see clearly who is the real oppressor. right now Obama's going around saying, I let out the prisoners, we have to stop the prison system. It's like you were completely a big part of this prison system. He ramped up the drug war. He reduced transparency. He didn't do any of the things that he was supposed to do. So now that he lets out a couple guys, and I'm very happy for the people that were released. I think that's great. It's a start. But actually, no, it's not a start. It's ridiculous. It's a joke. It's blatantly just manipulating people emotionally. And then I saw him on Jon Stewart, and they were, oh, Obama, he's so wonderful. He's no different than any other tyrant before him. You know, Bush was a nightmare. Clinton was a nightmare. They were all nightmares. There's not one of them that's particularly great. I mean, they're almost getting progressively worse. And it's actually really racist and insulting to think that just because somebody's black, or with the case of Hillary, well, she's a girl, so, you know, that means that she should be president. I mean, it's ludicrous. And yet, I do find that people are manipulated that way. I had a friend. Well, it's depressing. So I had a friend. He's a pretty smart guy, and he was posting about the Confederate flag and how the Confederate flag needs to go. Now, the Confederate flag is also the rebel flag, and while there are some racist people that use the Confederate flag, it actually has been the symbol of freedom. Martin Luther King was using it, you know, with a black hand and a white hand holding each other, and that was one of their civil rights flags to show unity with blacks and whites. And so when he made that post, I very gently wrote him on Facebook, hi, you know, maybe you haven't considered this, and I sent him a video with the history of the flag, and he shut me down fast. He's like, I know you like to debate with people, but no, ain't gonna happen. You don't know what this means. And I'm not diminishing the suffering of the black population or any oppressed population. What I'm trying to point out is that the oppressor is not just the white man. He just happens to be white. It's the man is the problem. You know, the state, that representation, and he was so shut down and unable to even consider it for a second. It was very discouraging.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's like saying we should ban the back of the bus because, you know, we used to force all the black people to sit on the back of the bus, or not we, but the state.
Right, and also not we. Exactly. Like you and I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the thing is, going back to your previous point with racism and blaming other things, this is really typical of very human. You see it all the time where the state will use, you know, as soon as someone gets hungry for the 3 days, they start putting on uniforms, which are supplied by the state, because they get fearful. And when someone's fearful, especially for their family, all they need to do is point to the most irrational answer to why they're feeling pain, and they'll believe it and just charge towards it because they're hungry. You saw this with the hyperinflation in Germany, and then, you know, World War II. People start putting on uniforms, they start blaming people, they start really going insane. You see it all, constantly, over and over again throughout history. And it's really important and to, you know, and this is where I think the internet is such an amazing tool that's been given to us by all the technicians of the world, that most people, especially with race, I mean, we can now communicate across the world with anybody, and also, you know, with real-time translation really almost around the corner, if not already here, we're starting to communicate with one another and see that there's not really that many differences, that people, whether they're black, Asian, white, Hispanic, they all basically just want to feed their family, be happy, work, and trade. They don't want much more. People just want to live their lives.
Totally.
You know, there's a tiny minority who might, you know, who believe some crazy religious thing, or use something else and blow it up to a religious level. But generally, most people just want to get along. And so the internet is also spreading information about money. I mean, how amazing is it that I can ask a lot of people now, yeah, there's a long way to go for sure, but I can ask a lot of people, hey, what do you think of the Federal Reserve System? They're like, oh yeah, I saw a YouTube video on that. It's crazy. Oh my God. So it should definitely be changed. Wow. I didn't realize where money came from. And you know, that anyone in the world can now have a YouTube channel or whatever they want, some sort of podcast or a way to broadcast is stunning. You know, I come from a long time in television, working in television, where, you know, to get a television license back in the day was, you had to be so super rich, you just couldn't do it. And they were shutting down pirate radio networks. You know, people had to drive around in vans and then pop up and quickly broadcast and then come back down and run. Whereas nowadays, you don't need to run from anything. You just, you know, create a channel and start networking with people that you can, you know, the Logos Radio Network and stuff like that. It's amazing.
But what do we do with the sloths? You know, there are some people that are fighting back, and that's encouraging. But then there are just like the people that don't want to know and that want to believe. Also, I mean, you know, these people that have a problem with police brutality, for example, I don't know, like they're really easily manipulated, and I think it comes back to that fear thing, and I don't know how we wrangle that away without having, I mean, we do have the internet, although they're trying to control that, and that is actually, you know, being successful to a certain, you know, to a certain point, but I don't know how we can reach more people without having access to some of the tools available to the quote-unquote enemy. I think the only really good reason I've heard for people to be excited about banks using Bitcoin is that, great, let them teach everybody how to use cryptocurrency, even if it's their own weird banky one, and then people that want to opt out, they can go over to Bitcoin, and then the Bitcoin community doesn't need to worry about educating, you know, billions of people around the world on how to use this really weird thing. So using almost the marketing and some of those resources from those banking sectors, and then utilizing it to promote freedom in a weird way. Because, okay, well, maybe you use Chase Coin for a while, but then when you hear about Bitcoin or something similar, you do have the opportunity to opt out, and now it's not as foreign.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we even need that. I really see the tools from when I first started playing with Bitcoin. It was, you know, mostly command line and a really sketchy core client, which was the Satoshi client. And
But
now,
aren't you technical though? You know what I mean? Like for me, Bitcoin
yeah,
is super hard. Even now, I mean, it's a lot easier, but it could still be pretty tricky.
yeah, but like you said, it's gotten easier, right? From when you first got into it to now. I mean, some of the Bitcoin wallets that are popping up on the Android store, you know, CoPay, which is an open source multi-sig wallet, is super simple. And yeah, it's still not grandma proof, but the internet wasn't there within 5 years either. You know, the internet, grandpa would say, why do I need email? No one even has email. What am I going to do? You know, email some techie guy. What's the point? I don't need it. Nowadays, they're all sitting there with their iPads, swiping away and emailing their friends overseas. And so I think, you know, technology and Bitcoin will get easier and easier to use, and we don't even need Chase Coin or GovCoin, because it'll just happen. And technology has a way of finding freedom. You know, the internet, yeah, is being controlled to a certain extent, but at the same time, you could say anything right now, and the people listening to you will hear it. So they can't just control right now what we're talking about. What they can do is storm into your house and run you down and put you in a cage, but they can do that whatever system we put in place for the internet. Plus, things like the blockchain and storage and these concepts that we're, very technical people are on their way to creating a fully distributed, decentralized internet. Again, the internet was meant to be decentralized and it's become more centralized, but I think that will definitely turn around as we're seeing now already. There's already 3 decentralized marketplaces popped up, which are absolutely stunning. And then, on top of that, there's storage or whatever, however you pronounce it.
Storage. Yeah, it's a strange spelling. And then there's MadeSafe. Is that what you're talking about with the distributed internet?
Exactly.
I love those guys. Yeah, that's the team.
It's really amazing stuff. So I don't think we should be filled with fear and the tyranny of the boot is stomping on our heads.
But I think that that's how they're going to deal with these kinds of freedoms. I think that if I was an evil overlord, I wouldn't really appreciate what was going on. And they've shown before, time and time again, that they're not afraid to murder their own people. I don't think that this government or the UK government or any of the governments that are out there right now are any more high quality and moral people that aren't going to. I think that they will quickly and swiftly try and stamp any kind of opposition. So I feel personally a lot of pressure, and I am a little nervous because I think that the kind of work that we're trying to engage in is really, really powerful. And it's also easier for me as an artist to talk about Bitcoin than it is about saying I'm a libertarian or I'm an anarchist or something, because people have serious misconceptions about those words that are even more ingrained than their hatred of Bitcoin. But I could still talk to them about the Federal Reserve and what does the central banking system do and how does regulation really affect things. And actually that makes me hopeful for the socialists that all love Bernie. They all think that, I think that they're well-intentioned, but they're fools when it comes to economics. So I used to be a big fan of Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich is still cool, but I have no idea how he even thinks that things are fiscally possible with some of his suggestions. Because once I learned about, Austrian economics, all of those illusions were completely gone. So maybe there is some hope for people on the left to kind of come over. And arguably, even if we kept these institutions in power and they had, okay, well, they get some taxes. I mean, maybe if they spent it on stuff that wasn't absolutely horrible for us, then we might be able to kind of deal with that. You know what I mean? Like all right, fine. You can have a government, just stop killing everybody and brainwashing us and poisoning us. Thanks. Bare minimum of what we'd like them to do.
Yeah. I think Bitcoin is one of these things that it works very, very well because in a libertarian favor, because you don't have to sell it as a libertarian utopian currency.
Right. You don't have to say liberty ever.
Ever.
In fact, I recommend you don't. Just lure them in, sucker them in, and then switch and bait. Or bait switch.
It really is. It's you don't need to teach them about the Federal Reserve. Of course, those things help. But at the end of the day, it's a really nice way where we're currently running a crowd equity fund, crowdfunding campaign.
Where are you doing it? Are you doing it on Bank of America or Bank of the Future or whatever it is?
Yeah, Bank to the Future. We're launching on Wednesday, but we've got a pre-launch link for our members, and I'll post the link for you guys too, so you guys can buy some shares before it goes to the public. But anyway, what I wanted to say was we used a quote in the video from Buckminster Fuller, which is you can't fight an existing power structure to defeat it. To defeat an existing power structure, I'm paraphrasing here, but to defeat it, you just build something new that makes the old obsolete. And that's really what Bitcoin does. it just ignores all the rubbish. You don't need to fight, and I hate the word fighting. We're fighting for freedom, because I don't want to fight for anything. I just want to live my life a free human being, and so I'll choose things where I don't need to fight, and it creates the same thing for me. Whereas, you know, as a good entrepreneur, you're always trying to find win-win situations. It's really important, and I think Bitcoin does that, and Bitcoin and gold and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, after the Ron Paul 2012 campaign, I was still touring around the country in 2013 and performing and stuff like that, and the vibe had totally changed at all these events. It was super depressing because everybody was so dejected after seeing that those rules were never in a billion years going to be followed. They didn't. It wasn't about the rules. It was just about the illusion that there was an electoral process that was legitimate, and it was infuriating and really upsetting. And when I found out about Bitcoin on a deeper level, because I had known about Bitcoin since August of 2012, but I remember it was when I went to Jeffrey Tucker's event in Atlanta that I all of a sudden realized, wow, there's hope, and you don't have to beg for it. Like, it was the ultimate FU, because it didn't require us saying, no, give me my freedom. It was just like being like, you know, it's like seeing a car in the middle of the road. You just go around and you keep going on your way, and nobody has to get stressed out about it. And I loved that about it. It was really, really cool. Absolutely. And I actually got, do you know Bob Murphy?
Yeah,
economist, and also karaoke extraordinaire. Yeah, he's actually a good friend. Anyway, so I taught him about Bitcoin, and he says I'm allowed to tell people that, and that's how I lured him in, because I said, Bob, I'm telling you, these people are not depressed. There's hope out there. You just have to show up.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's, you know, how I reached the point of voluntarism was that, you know, in the early 90s, the French government, Jacques Chirac, wanted to bomb Murat Atoll with an A bomb, to test the A bomb. Of course, you know, we need to test A bombs.
Awesome.
And they had some of the biggest rallies in the world at the time, saying, don't, we don't want, you know. And I was there, and I came from the green left side, of course, you know, young and impressionable, and wanted to save the earth, which I still do. I mean, I still love to save the earth. I don't want our forests killed and stuff, of course. But what I realized after that, they just bombed it anyway. And then the Iraq War came, and we had the biggest demos the world had ever seen globally. You know, no war. Grandmas who had never been to a demo were out and about. The whole thing, amazing. Went anyway. And that's really when I went, you know what, this government deal, it's just a load of crud. It's a big show. We don't have a say. What's the point? The amount of energy that's being put into these demos, it can be used so much better, and that energy can be allocated to actually building great things that, like Buckminster Fuller said, just make the old obsolete. And that's I think much better.
Yeah, I agree. It's good to have that hope, because I think it can get really, really depressing. You know, I see all these people getting all bent out of shape about the elections, and while I think that they have some influence in terms of thinking, and I think that allowing people to hear new ideas is good to spread a message, at the end of the day, I mean, even Rand Paul, who's got some weird positions and then some good ones. I mean, they gave him 4 minutes. He's trying to play ball with the system. That's the speculation. And they gave him 4 minutes at the debate. And right in the middle, they put Jeb Bush, because we need another Bush so badly, and Donald Trump, who's literally a joke. Horrible people.
Horrible. But folks, I mean, this is the joke. I mean, all the people in the CIA, the FBI, every three-letter thing, they're not voted in. Whoever gets voted in this time, all the apparatus stays. Ben Lawsky, who wrote this ridiculously tyrannical Orwellian nonsense, Bitcoin license, bit license, didn't get voted in. It didn't matter who was in power at the time. It could have been Bush, it could have been Obama, it could have been anyone. He would have written the same paper. And so this whole nonsense is just some sort of distraction. It's bread and circuses for the common people to sit there being all rallied up and out. I mean, I've seen, you know, you go to the pub sometimes or the local cafe and you'll see people really at each other about some pathetic thing that they can't change anyway. They're really, you know, it's amazing that how distracting politics is and how futile it is to try to, you know, fight it. Yeah, it's of course human nature to talk. You know, there's politics in terms of the business. People will be bitching and moaning about some internal politics. There's always politics, but the fact that people get so riled up is amazing. I mean, you know, most people that are, you know, voluntarists or even libertarian have had the experience where you're telling someone about something and the other people get so upset, maybe they're from the left, they get so upset, you hate the poor and all this stuff, and you're thinking, first of all, no, I don't, and second of all, everything that I say, there's no way society's going to flip all of a sudden in our lifetime and be completely government free. So you don't have to worry too much. You know, you can live your crazy status life. And so yeah, I don't know exactly where it's 4 in the morning. So
well, I don't know. I feel like you're keeping it together for 4 a.m. I was worried that you were gonna. Were you sleeping before we had our show today?
I was, and I had a cold shower and a big mug of coffee.
Oh, well, now you're never going to be able to go back to sleep.
I'm sure.
So, do you think that there's a way to bring around people that still believe in the system? You know, there's good people out there that believe that the system is there, and oh, okay, it's kind of flawed, but you need to have regulation, you need to have police, and you need to have government, because otherwise it would just be wild and crazy, and oh man, people would be free, it would be terrible. So, and arguably, I'm not really sure that the libertarian community, for example, has done the best job of policing for internally, you know, in terms of shaming people for bad behavior. I don't actually think that we do that great of a job of that. So there are some question marks about what would constitute justice. How do we kind of deal with one another, even if it is in a voluntary fashion. And I don't know if we can ever really figure that out under current circumstances. But say you've got a friend who's a statist, you know, how do you get them to see it, or do you just not focus on that? I'm not really sure how to do it. And maybe they don't even want to get that lesson. Maybe they think that you're, you know, wild and crazy hippie.
I think the first thing that people can do is that are already there in their mind, are already convinced, is to live that lifestyle for themselves and be an example. The second thing I would say is you can't convince people of something by constantly telling them how something should be. I think by learning the Socratic method of questioning is a way to really get people to start thinking and coming to the conclusions by themselves. The Socratic method of questioning comes from, of course, Socrates, who used it in a really nice way where, used this form of questioning where you ask someone a question. Like, for instance, I saw an interview. It was, what's his name? Anyway, he was interviewing a politician, about the minimum wage and saying, do you think that the minimum wage is moral? And so there's a question. And the interviewer says, well, of course it is. It's very important. We can't have people below a certain wage. So instead of saying, yeah, but and why it's bad, you then say, so do you think McDonald's should be able to pay $1 or nothing to people to work there? And the politicians, no, absolutely not. That's ludicrous. You can't do that. People have to live. And then he said, do you think politicians should be able to have unpaid interns? Of course, then the eyes there, well, because they have all these unpaid interns working their asses off for them. And the fact of them, and of course that then they get so mad because they've come to their own illogical clashes in their mind and expose themselves. And of course you get some anger from the Socratic method. I mean, Socrates was poisoned by Amlet, he was poisoned to death, and because of this, because he sort of shamed people. But I think if you can do a little bit of research on how that works and how to question people to make them say what you wanted to say in the first place, and it's a really effective way of getting people to think in other ways. Yeah.
Seems like a lot of planning. I don't know if I could keep my mouth shut long enough for them to come up with the conclusion. But I think that you have to be really thoughtful if you're going to approach it that way. I don't know if I'm obviously a person that wants to change people's minds. I think that's definitely good advice, but I think it might be a little bit harder to figure out how to do that.
It definitely is. Oh man, I've tripped up along lots of times where I just ended up going, yeah, but the roads will be built by blah blah blah, and start giving my answers to how. And the fact of the matter is, we don't know how the roads are going to be built. We can guess, but if we did know all the answers to how every possible conceivable thing will be done, then we would be actually saying that dictatorship is what we need, because I've got all the answers, which is untrue. Of course I don't, and of course you don't. And so the free market of ideas is what has the answers. But I would recommend that what I've come to really people that are very stuck, I prime a conversation with a man, try to let go of everything and let's think of solutions to social problems without violence. Let's just try it. Let's pretend it's a sci-fi book that we're writing and we want to come up with crazy ideas that are totally ludicrous. And that sort of releases people from their own dogma if they can pretend they're writing a sci-fi novel or just coming up with crazy ideas where they don't believe they have to live in that. Because I was sitting at the park the other day because it's beautiful summer here in Berlin, and we were having a barbecue, and this girl said, yeah, but if there's no taxes, then how would society run? And the learning curve that I have to give this person who's really not that intelligent in the first place, let alone...
I hope she doesn't see this show.
I know. But to try to... The learning curve is so huge. I mean, I've been studying philosophies and economics for years to get to the point where I'm at. So it's quite difficult in the park to instantly tell people how society's going to run and how not street thugs are just going to be ruling everything. without a state, and that's really it's just a tricky thing, and I think it's just something where we need to slowly approach. It's just a slow moving train, and that's what it is.
How would we know that the richest people wouldn't just hire murderous thugs to protect only them, and they would be able to afford that?
Well, first of all, how's that stopped in the current system, where
That's actually exactly our current system.
it's pretty much exactly our current system. So, okay.
But I don't know if that's like a good enough reason, because I go back to this, in Liberty I found that there have been, I know some girls, for example, and they were with, one of them had a boyfriend who used to beat the crap out of her, threaten her life, and another woman, she had been sexually assaulted by this stalker, and he turned out to be a rapist. But the entire time that either of them were trying to convey that to people, people would say, oh, that's terrible, or they wouldn't believe them, and then they would just continue carrying on and functioning with said, wife beater and rapist. That's really disappointing, and it really makes you feel like a pause and a question mark before saying anarchy, because even within a theoretically enlightened group, people are not able to ostracize each other even. I mean, there is no justice. People don't necessarily stand up for each other, even though they may say that they're going to and whatnot. So that does give me a little bit of a question mark. I still think it'd probably be better than what's going on now. But I'm not really sure how that would work itself out.
Well, we have insurance companies to deal with, to collect money from everyone for the masses, for the unfortunate few. And that works fine. We have crowdfunding, which is going crazy now. I mean, 10 years ago, if you said there would be a bunch of people that will put money to any old project and you get a credit on the website, they'd go, that would never happen. Everyone's too greedy for that. No way. If you told people that people would lease out their apartments to random strangers for an extra buck or two when they're overseas, no way, that's crazy talking. The other thing that I wanted to say was, in Europe we have we've had a very long history of communist regimes, of socialist regimes, and my father grew up in East Berlin, and he would explain. He explained to me as well, in Stalinist Russia, for instance, if you told people that food should be run by a free market, by anarchy, they would say, what? No, and all the same arguments came up every time. Food will just skyrocket in price. The rich will only the rich will eat. I mean, and that's the same argument to only the rich will have good security. And the thing is that once the free market took food over, instead of these Stalinist bread lines where you literally stood in line for 3 hours to get a piece of bread, now with the free market, generally free, as it's not super free, but we are eating better than any king or queen has eaten in the past. I mean, we can have access to herbs and spices from all over the world.
And Monsanto.
Yeah, I mean, there's
beautifully genetically modified organisms.
There's definitely statist components of food production, for sure. And I'm not excusing that, and farmer subsidies and all this stuff, but they cause even they cause distortions in the market. These farm subsidies, massive distortions, and overfishing and stuff, because, well, fishermen keep on fishing because they're getting paid for the fish, so the fish don't get more expensive when they become rarer. But but generally, the market supplies everything you need, and things generally become cheaper. So, when people say, well, how would the market deal with health? People need health. They need healthcare. And I definitely want healthcare. I mean, I've had a heart valve surgery. I don't want to have to, all of a sudden be out of pockets of millions because of something that's happened to me that I've got no control over. But how do we do that without the violence of the state? And that's a really, really important issue. And it's all possible. It's all possible through mechanisms that we already understand, that we use for everything, day in, day out. I mean, insurance is very well understood. Crowdsourcing and crowdfunding and charity is very well understood. Roads can be built by people that build the houses. Part of building a house is actually building a section of the road that reaches the house. That just becomes part of the cost of building a house. I mean, there's multiple answers to these things without a big gun pointing at everyone saying, we need schools, we need hospitals, and we need lawyers and
lots of lawyers, lots and lots of lawyers.
Lots and lots of lawyers, yeah. Armies of lawyers. No, there's definitely possibilities, and I'm not saying it's going to be a utopia. I'm not saying our vision of a stateless society would be a utopia, but I definitely think that that it will be better than the massive wars of aggression going on right now, not only overseas but on home turf as well, against poor or against minority groups, because they're minorities, and of course we're ruled by the majority, so that's democracy.
I don't know where people could even run to these days. I think about leaving, and I'm like, where would I go? There's nowhere where they won't find me. I mean, it's only a matter of time. I think that this is a period of history where mankind has to kind of push back, because if they accumulate more power, it just becomes exponentially more difficult to, I guess, wrestle yourself out from underneath the boot.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to save myself. I get it. But
yeah,
I also think that people have to kind of fight back. And I don't mean violently. I don't mean with like an actual, violent revolution of any kind. I would prefer to avoid that, actually. I don't think I would fare well in that environment. But honestly, if it came to that, I think it'd be better than, I mean, whatever happened to give me liberty or give me death? Now they're like, give me liberty unless it's slightly dangerous, and then just take them all away. Take them all away. You're right. I'm going to go be afraid in my apartment now.
Give me liberty or give me a job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Look, the thing I think I have to always remember is that there isn't one big octopus, one world government as yet. There are competing states and with competing laws, and you can see this with Bitcoin, even in America. With the bit license in New York, now LA is saying, yeah, come over here. Or, even though they've got some stupid license being built. But it's, you can see the competition starting to happen. London originally had GST, or a VAT, a goods and services tax, on every Bitcoin, every time you receive Bitcoin, buying and selling Bitcoin. Of course, they repealed that very, very quickly as everyone just exited. And they went, hey, sorry, mistake. Australia's done the same thing now. So it's trying to do the same thing. So, I don't think, I'm like you, I don't think I would fare well in some sort of war, and I'd never want to. I'd rather use my brains and education and peace and find better solutions for society that people just want to gravitate to, rather than forcing other people, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's really important to have a lot of people in Bitcoin that still remember that. It's very disheartening when people seem to forget. So I'm really glad that we got a chance to kind of talk about a lot of that stuff. I mean, what you guys are doing with Vaultoro sounds cool, but what makes you really cool is, I think, in my book, the liberty mindset. I love seeing that out there. I feel like we're almost outnumbered sometimes, and it's disappointing, and it makes me look around at everybody and say, what the hell are you guys doing? This is our big chance. You're blowing it.
Yeah, well, this is why I just last little plug for our crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding sales. So I really wanted to get in touch with the early Bitcoiners because it was the vast majority of early Bitcoiners were politically motivated or non-politically motivated, I should say, and had a lot of great philosophical stances of why they fell in love with Satoshi's white paper, and so. And that's why I really wanted, these people to invest instead of some big VC or some, mega bank. I really want the people to invest, and that's why I love crowdfunding. I think it's really fantastic. And this is another case of regulatory capture by the VC communities, where, for years it was illegal for a company to publicly ask for publicly sell shares for their company. You had to go through an IPO, millions, around $1 million to do that. It was way too expensive. So what that did was lock out the small guy from investing. Of course, you could go privately to a VC and say, hey, you want to, be a part, or publicly even. But people had to be, high net worth, registered by the state, I think, by some sort of group. And even at the IPO stage, only large VCs would, or corporations would be able to buy up at that stage. And then post-IPO, the normal Joe could get on and put an order in for his stock and shares. So I think crowdfunding is really fantastic, and that it's and equity crowdfunding is even better, because we saw with the Oculus Rift, all these people put money into the Oculus Rift when they went on Kickstarter, which is this virtual reality headset.
I know, I tried it out. It's super duper cool. Really cool. I could care less about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I went over to Adam's and he made me put it on, and I was blown out of the water. I didn't even know what to make of it. Have you ever tried it?
I've tried not the Oculus Rift, but a different brand, and it's stunning, and it's the drug of the future. It really is. It's ultimate escapism.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think that people will even need relationships. And when you hear about that, you're like, no, people always really need relationships. No. If you experience one of those things, it's so real. It's the weirdest. It's really cool, but also a little bit disconcerting.
Yeah, it's very Matrix, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully we won't lose those the things that make us human.
No, absolutely. I don't think we will. I think there's always pockets of. It's not like everyone in society works instantly. Playing air guitar with their fake guitars with their headsets.
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping that someone will get me one at some point, because tomorrow's my birthday. So if anybody's watching, make sure you get me an Oculus Rift.
Crowdfund for Tatiana's Oculus.
Yeah, no, I'd be more interested in for Tatiana coin than Oculus Rift. But it is a really cool toy.
Well, what I wanted to say with it was that the original backers who made the whole thing possible basically got a really crappy first development kit generation thing that half worked, didn't really track, and it was just nonsense. But I guess it has some sort of collector's item value. But you know, they sold to Facebook for $2 billion with a B dollars. What did the people get that originally invested? They're still sitting there with their, masking taped thing, first generation, Uber alpha stage generation Oculus. And so the good thing with equity crowdfunding is that people actually buy a part of the company, so that when there is a large exit, or there's large growth, the people funding the original thing actually get something out of it, which is really cool.
Yeah, I definitely liked that when I did Tatiana Coin, but I guess that there's some fear about looking at it that way. I mean, arguably, if somebody buys a coin and I become more popular, then the coin would go up in value, but that's not really what I spend time focusing on. But it is a little bit similar to that type of thing. But I think that the regulations in the United States are a little bit more stringent, and that's just not something I'm prepared to worry about.
Yeah, I think even the Kickstarter style stuff is fantastic. I mean, it's great to be able to get something to support an artist. You know, not every time people are looking to profit from something. You know, it's definitely a caveat. It's definitely something that's nice, but a lot of people's motivations aren't that. A lot of people's motivations are purely to get a copy of the album or to support an artist, to know that they're doing well because they really love their work. And not only an artist, game developers, which are also artists, I guess, or some gadget. You know, people want to see something that will change the world for the better, and that's that's not always not always a reward. A financial reward isn't always the motivation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that people are all so depressed out there. I think that they just really want to feel like they're a part of something, and I think that, coinifying things and crowdfunding and equity and all that stuff, crowd equity, I don't even know what you call it, but people really get into that, and I like that, and that's good. People should feel inspired. They should feel that entrepreneurial spirit, and unfortunately, things are very difficult for entrepreneurs these days. In some ways, they're a lot easier, but then there's other kind of ways that that's sort of being suppressed, and I think that that's definitely the wave of the future. So when are you guys doing it, and what's the time frame?
So we're running for 40 days, and we're on Max Kaiser and Simon Dixon's Bank to the Future.
Mm-hmm.
That's bnktothefuture.com. I'll give you a link, and you can put it in the show notes.
Sure.
So yeah, click in there and have a look. It's not live yet. If you click on the link in the show notes before this Thursday, you'll get pre-release, so you can buy before it goes public. So I wanted to do that for our users and the original, people that were liberty-minded Bitcoiners, to be able to get in there and buy some up before it sells out. And we will use that to expand into other languages and get some more developers, so we can build iPhone, apps for phones, so that people in the unbanked can start using gold again as a global value and a currency. Actually, I think what's really beautiful about mixing Bitcoin and gold is that gold is a great store of value. It's shown that it's a great store of value for thousands of years, but it's really not that good as a currency, especially in the times that we live in now. The times that we live in now is a global society where, I want to buy something out of the States or out of, some other place on the internet, and so gold is really heavy, even locally, to carry that around to markets. Plus, you have to have it in lots of different divisible things, and you have to make sure the coin's real. So, by having gold that's certified good delivery bar gold, 99.995, means that you can then use that value as a store of value, but use Bitcoin as the currency to send that instantly over the net, and it makes gold again for the first time, actually, a truly global, instantly transferable value, which is just beautiful.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited for you guys. What's the minimum that people have to spend if they want to do it?
The minimum on Bank to the Future is $1,000, I think. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's for rich people. It's not just for
Well,
everybody.
well, I can't change that. Actually, no, they give away 100 start coin. Everyone can get a free investment into Vaultoro. They give away 100 start coin, which is worth $10 or something. So,
Oh, so
and
then they can get involved.
yeah, they can get involved. That's something to do. Yeah, that's something on Bank to the Future. But yeah, I think the what the rewards were. 1,000 is non-voting shares, and 10,000 is voting shares, and 100,000 you get an interview to be on the board of directors.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I think all that's really great. I know it's really late for you, so I don't want to keep you up. And, this show goes out on Let's Talk Bitcoin sometimes, and we've got a magic word. What would you like the magic word to be? It could be a phrase, too.
Vaultoro.
No, we can't make it a plug. It has to be something else. It has to be
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, let's make it voluntarism.
voluntarism.
Yeah.
Enjoy spelling that, suckers. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's correct because it's not volunteerism. There's another one, but it means people have to Google it and check it out.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, cool. So what's your website? What's your Twitter handle if people want to follow along?
Yeah, so the Twitter handle is Vaultoro at Vaultoro. That's VAULTORO, and the website, of course, is vaultoro.com.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and thank you to Crypto Media Hub for sponsoring the show. If you have any advertising needs, please call me at Crypto Media Hub. And what else? Next week I've got another guest, but I don't remember who it is. I have Elise Colleen, who's actually a venture capitalist. So she'll actually have some good insight on, what is the future of VC, and she's also a very good friend of mine. So people can tune in next Monday, August 17th. And thank you very much, Josh, for being on the show. Thank you to Liberty.me for hosting us. And thank you to Let's Talk Bitcoin. If anybody wants to check out some of these old episodes of the Tatiana the Tatiana show, sorry, it's late for me too, they can go to Liberty.me or to Let's Talk Bitcoin, where I've got a bunch of blogs and stuff up on there too, and TatianaMrose.com. Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.